learning the Sikha inside, it's kedai to, in order to have a better understanding of the Sikha, I will go through just very bekitzer the different psukim in the beginning of the parsha, which the Rebbe will mention back and forth, so it's get to know. So let's start like this. So I'm not learning the Sikha yet inside. I'm just reading the pasuk. The pasuk, the first pasuk in Chumash Dvorim, Parshas Dvorim is Eila Dvorim Asher Diber Moshe Kol Yisrael Be'ever HaYarden. These are the words that Moshe spoke to the Yidden Be'ever HaYarden. And then the pasuk continues. Seemingly, it means that this is where he spoke. By Midbar, it was in the Midbar. Bo Arava, in the Arava. Male Suf, across the Yam Suf. Bein Por and the Bein Teifel, between Por and the Bein Teifel. The Lavan, in the place of Lavan. And Chatzeres and Dizov. All these words are here. What do all these words mean? So Rashi explains that what Moshe Rabbeinu is going to do here, he's giving Techoche, he's giving rebuke to the Yidden and mentioning to them all the places before where they got the Eibishter angry. And all the things that he mentions in the pasuk here are all hints to different inyonim that they did throughout the 40 years in the Midbar. The reason Rashi says Moshe didn't actually mention the Avedas themselves, he only hinted to it because Kveitim Shel Yisrael, he didn't want to mention all the Avedas, he wanted to keep the covenant of Eden. Okay, and then Rashi goes on. When he says Bamidbar, what does it mean Bamidbar? They weren't in the Midbar now, so what does it mean they were in the Midbar? It means Arves Meyov. What's the charge by Midbar? No, it's a remez. He's telling them that they got the Eibishter angry in the Midbar. When they crossed the Yamsuf and they came into the Midbar, it says they had no water, so they got very angry and they said, "Miyu Yitam was saying that we'd rather have died in Mitzrayim." That's what he was mentioning to them by Midbar. When you were in the Midbar, something bad you did. Then it says Ba'arova. That's the Arova means Arves Meyov. What happened with Arves Meyov? The Maisa with Balpeh, with the adultery that he did, is Nus and Aved the Zora Balpeh. Male Suf, what does male Suf mean? When they rebelled against the Eibishter by the Yam Suf, when they came to the Yam Suf, if you remember from Parsha B'Shalom, they said, "We're going to die here. There was no graves in Mitzrayim. Why'd you bring us here?" Also, when they went out of the Yam Suf, they also rebelled. Now, Rashi doesn't say what they did. We'll get to it later. What was it that they did? And Rashi quotes the Gemara in Erech, and the Gemara says what they did. Okay. Then it says that between Poron and Teifel and Lovon. So Rabbi Yechanan said that we looked at all the psukim, there's no place that we know that's called Teifel and Lovon. Elamai, what does it mean? Teifel and Lovon. Teifel also has a meaning of getting someone complaining. So they complained about something that's Lovon. What was Lovon? What was white? The Mon. So this is a remez that they complained against the Mon. Then it says, Midbar Poron, that goes on the Meraglim. Midbar Poron was the Maisa with the Meraglim. Chatzeres is the Machlekes of Kerach. And what's Dizov? That's what we're getting to. The Sikha is going to be talking by the last one. Dizov. So what does Rasha say? Dizov means Heichichon ala egel she'osa b'shvil reit zov shoyelahem. That when it says Dizov, he was Mechia them, he gave him rebuke about the egel that they did and what made them do it because they had so much gold. You quote the pasuk Shnemer in Yeshaya, it says, "The kesef herbeisi lo, the zov osalabal, or the kesef herbeisi lahem." Let's learn the sikha inside. The tchilas parsha seinu, in the beginning of the parasha, la pasuk eila dvorim ashniber meisha v'geimet. These are the things Moshe said. At the end of the pasuk mentions Dizov. The parish Rashi says like this: Dizov. What does that mean? Hechicham al egel she'osa b'shvil reiv zov. He rebuked them for the egel that they did because every word in Rashi is negated. We know when we learn a Rashi Sikha, the Rebbe is medayik in every word. Because of so much gold that they had. Shoyelahem. Shenema, and he quotes a pasuk where it says that Eden had a lot of gold, and because of that they did Avodah Zarah. It says a pasuk, the kesef beisi lohem, I gave him a lot of kesef, b'zov osel Baal. So they used the gold, they used the money, they used the things that they had for the Baal, Avodah Zarah. The same thing here. By the way, the Rebbe mentions in the order that in the pasuk it doesn't say kesef beisi lohem, it says kesef beisi lo. But it means the same thing. It means the Yidden. David is saying, the Navi is saying that David gave a lot of money to the Yidden. Others law fit. Law, because the Yidden in that pasuk is referred to Loshen Nekeva as if they're the wife of the Eibishter. So that's what the pasuk says. So when the pasuk says that Dizov, Rashi says, it means that he was mechiach them for the Egel, for the fact that they made the Egel. So that's the Taich. So what does it got to do with Zohov? Because they made the Egel because they had a lot of gold. So the Rebbe say, Rashi already mentioned right in the beginning. That's why I read the first Rashi. Right, the first words on the pasuk. Rashi says that what he's going to say is divrei tichoches. The whole pasuk is rebuke for different things they did. And the pasuk is mentioning all the places where they did certain things. They got the Eibishter angry. Basically, it's a shaila. Why does Rashi again have to write here by the Zizov that he was mechiach them for the egel? Rashi already gave a hakdama that all this that he's saying here is things that he's mechiach them for different things. So on Dizov, all Rashi should have said that Dizov is the egel. Zeha egel. She also because they had Zov. Why does Rashi repeat again Hechichon? Near the Rebbe, I think the pshat is Shataimo. The reason is because Rashi used the lotion that he's mentioning different places, the places where they got the Eibishter angry. But Dizov is not one of the places. Rashi holds that's not the name of a place. See, Chatzeret is the name of a place. Arvis Meiv is the name of a place. Dizov is not the name of a place. So we wouldn't know that Dizov is also Tichocha, because Rashi said in the beginning, he's Mechiach them, mentioning all the places. Meaning that the places that are mentioned are for the sake of Tichocha. But this is not a place. Loch and Pirish Rashi, I'm saying it together with what the Rebbe says in the Hor also, but this is in the Kudah. So therefore, Rashi says on Dizov, the word again, Hechichon. Before, when he mentioned the different places, Rashi doesn't mention on every one. Well, he was mechir them for this, and he was mechir them for this. He gave one akdame. It was mentioned all the places to mechir them what they did. But here, he doesn't mention hechichon al ha'egel she'asa b'shvil reiv zov. Mechir them for the egel that they did because of a lot of gold. So why does Rashi do it? B'zek avanos gam lahadgish. Rashi wants to stress she'ein dei zov shemokim. Dizov is not a place. So it's not included in what Rashi said before, Hechichon, and all the places. So therefore, Rashi again has to mention it, that he's Mechiach, Hechichon al Egel. But Rashi is also telling us that by saying these words, that he was Mechiach, then for the Egel, he's Merames, that this is not the name of a place. The Loshen Dizov, the words Dizov, refer to the Egel. See, the other things, he mentions the place, mentions the Chatzeres, he mentions the place, and we already know what did they do in the place. Look back in Chumash, you'll see what they did. Here it's not a place. He's just mentioning Dizov. Dizov is a hint itself to the Egel. Hechichon al Egel. He was mechir them by these words of the Egel. Because Rashi Bemes, on a few words before, where it says Teifel and Loban, Rashi makes it very clear that it's not a place. Rashi says like this. Rashi says there, I'll read the Rashi again. Rashi says, we look through all the psukim in the Torah. Don't find anywhere there's a place called Teifel V'Lovan. So what does Teifel V'Lovan mean? Teifel V'Lovan, that they were nitful, they were teifel, they complained against the Moam, which is Lovan. But here Rashi also mentions the word Hechichon again. Why? If he said already that he was mechir in the beginning, because Gam Teifel V'Lovan ain't a Shemokim. Teifel V'Lovan not the name of a place. So when Rashi gave the Akdam L'Chatchila, he's mechir them all the places, fits to all the places, which are names of places, which is a place where they did certain things. But if he's mentioning a word which is not a place, Elamai is mechiach with the word, Rashi has to repeat again. What Taka makes Rashi say that it's not the name of a place? Maybe the Dizov is the name of a place. Maybe it's the name of a place. The simple reason probably is because we don't find anywhere in Chumash or in Tanakh such a name of a place. Which is similar to what Rashi wrote in the previous one, like Teifel V'Lovan. We looked through all the psukim. We didn't find a place called Teifel V'Lovan. Therefore, Ella, Rashi says, what does it mean? That they complained about the mon. So there Rashi says, we looked all the couldn't find. Here by Dizov, Rashi doesn't say it. So the Rebbe says in the order because it goes by Hemshech. Teifel V'Lovan is written before, and then it says Dizov. So before he said we looked, we couldn't find a place called Teifel V'Lovan. The mail it only teaches. It's a word that hints to an aveda. So here Rashi doesn't have to repeat it. All Rashi does is he says Heichichom, which itself shows that it's not a name of a place, because had it been a name of a place, Rashi wouldn't have to repeat the word Heichichom. Mele, we understand why Rashi holds that it's not a name of a place, because there is no such name of a place. But we have to understand. Why can't Rashi learn that this is the name of a place? We don't find the name of a place. Maybe the reason the place is called Dizov, because that's the place where they made the Egel. And they made the Egel because of the Zav. And that's what's the name of a place. Why can't it be the name of a place? We find a lot of places in the Torah that a place gets a name because of something that happened there. And the order the Rebbe gives a whole bunch of Mekamis. First in Parshas Neach says that why is Bavel called Bavel? Because Shom Bolal there Hashem mixed up all the people. Then it says in Parshas Shlach, I'm just mentioning one or two. In Parshas Shlach it says the place where the Meraglim cut off that branch with the grapes is called Nachal Eshkel. And it says in Chumash, why is it called Nachal Eshkel? Because that's what they did there. They took the Eshkel there. So we see a place could be called by its name. We don't find anywhere else the name of a place Dizov. So the Rebbe said, it's no problem. There are many places that the Torah is mentioned and only mentioned once. It doesn't mean there's no such place. And the Ha'ara, the Rebbe doesn't even bring examples. He just says, look at the Concordancia. No, the Concordancia is a sefer that every word of the Torah, where it's mentioned. So look in the Concordancia, you'll see so many names that are mentioned once in the Torah. So that's a problem. So why can't Dizov be a name? And it makes sense. It's not because of the Egel, but there's a place that's called Dizov because the Egel was made because of gold. How come by Teifel and Lovan, Rashi does say that? Rashi says Teifel and Lovan can't mean a place. Why can't it mean a place? Because we look through the whole Psukim and we don't find such a place. But now we just said it's no problem. The fact that we don't find anywhere just here means it's not a place, but Rashi does say it. Why? So the Rebbe says it's not the same. It's not the same like by Teifel V'Lovan. And the Rebbe is a cloud. You cannot say that the place got the name Teifel and Lovan because because they complained against the mom, which is white. You can't say that. Why not? Because whenever we give a place a name because of something that happened there, so the name, the words of the name have to be like this, or the word itself shows what happened, or at least it refers to something that was used for the act that happened, or it's a name that contains a word that's the reason why this and this Maisa happened. When it comes to Teifel V'Lovan, so two things here, Teifel and Lovan. Teifel means we touched, complained, and Lovan means the mon, because the mon was white. Now, both of these words don't indicate anything with the Aveda that they did at the complaint against the mon. Why? Because the fact that the mon was white, it's a side thing. It's not like one of the things, it's not the reason for the Aveda that they did, it's not the Aveda itself, it's not something with which the Aveda was done. White. If we use the word mon, yeah, you could say, oh, because the Aveda they complained against the mon, is hinted in the word mon. It doesn't say mon, it says white. Rather, the mon happens to be white, but that doesn't fit to any of these things. What about the word teifel, which means complaint? The word complaint itself doesn't mean anything. It doesn't hint to any specific Aveda. All the sins in the Midbar was they complained about something. So a male by teifel and Lovan, it's lochem mistabed, makes sense. Can't say teifel Lovan is a name of a place because there they complained against the mon. Should be hinted in a side word, which is white. So you can't say because the word doesn't show anything of the Aveda. But that's only by Teifel V'Lovan. That's what Rashi says there It doesn't mean that it's a place. These of these of could fit because why? Because they made the egel because of the gold. Oh, so here we said before that if the word contains something that is the reason why the Avera came, you could call the place by that name. So here you could do that because the reason why the Avera came, as Rasha, Kolosh Rasha, like Rasha says, also bishvil reizov shoylem. They did the egel because of the gold that they had. In Kain, but Mela, you could learn that this is also included in the places where they got Hashem angry. Because the place is called Dizov because the egel that they did, the reason for the egel was a lot of gold. So gold is the reason for the Aveda. So that could be there. So Mela, back to one kasha. What makes Rashi so sure that Dizov is not the name of a place? It could be the name of a place. And Taki because of the egel, but it could be the name of the place. Coming and moving, another kasha. What Rashi writes here, Rashi already wrote earlier in Parsha Kisiso, ala Posik, says the Posik says like this. After the Yidden did the Egel, the Posik says, Vayoshav Meishel Hashem, Vayemeh, Meisha turned to Hashem, and he said, and the Rebbe doesn't even bring the middle, the Geimet. What does it say there? Meisha said to the Eibishter, Oh no, Chotaho Amazech Hatog Deilo. The Yidden sinned a big Avere. And then he finished, Vayasolem Elekezov, and they made a god of gold. Pirush Rasha says, what does Elekezov mean? What did he mean when he said that he made a god of gold? It's your fault. You caused them to do the Aveda. You gave them gold, and you gave them everything that they need. What should they do? They shouldn't sin. Rebbe does bring the end of Rasha. Rasha brings a moshel of a king who gave the son everything, and the Muzgaputs, they made him look nice, and he smelled, and all's good, and he put him down in a place around a place of Zaynus. You're putting it in such a position. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu said to David. That's how Rasha teaches. When it says he said they made it a case of, he's hinting there that he told David, it's your fault. You gave him the gold, so it's your fault. Now, the Im Kipirish Rasha Khan, here, the way it seems, Rasha here is saying the same thing there. What Rasha says here, that Moshe referred to the Egel with the word Zohov, because the Leib Zohov caused them to do it, is the same idea. That's a word that what made them do it because they got a lot of gold. So it's the same idea like Rasha says there. But here, Rasha brings that ayah from a posik. The Kesev Rebbeis Yilem Zohov Osel Abal. The posik says that you gave him a lot of gold, silver, a lot of money, and they made from the Zohov, they made an Aveda Zorah. So here, Rasha brings a raya to the posik. It means that in order to say that's the pshat by Zohov, referring to the Egel, you have to have a raya from a posik. So Rasha, we're over there, he says the same thing, seemingly. We'll see later that Rebbe learns it's not the same. But seemingly the same thing, he should have brought the raya there. That's the first time it's mentioned. Rasha doesn't have to mention the same raya every time he mentions the same minyan. He mentions it once, and from there we understand every time, but not the second time. You should mention it the first time, and now we know it already. Now every time it's mentioned, you don't have to. Here Rasha did different. The first time he didn't bring the pasuk, and the second time he did. Rabbi that the Rebbe explains it like this. What made Rasha say it? Let's ask a shaila. What made Rasha in Pasha Kisiso say that's the pshat? When Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Eibishter, they sinned a big sin. They made a god of gold. So Rasha says what he meant to say is, you gave him the gold, so you caused it. What makes Rasha say it? So why say Pasha pshat? He said. Yeah, he came to the Eibishter and he said they did a big sin, they made a god of gold, and then he's asking him further, the Eibishter is asking him, forgive them. Why does Rasha say that the word gold is a remez, trying to tell Pshuta Shel Mikra, trying to tell the Eibishter it's your fault? Because the Rebbe says, why? It's very not understood, and I always say this whenever it says the word me'ed means it's a real tmiyah. Moshe started saying like this. They did a big sin. They made a god of gold. And this is kitab labakashose abot tekebachakar. This is a reason for what he's asking. What's he asking? And now in Tisachatosa, forgive them. So what did Moshe say? They did a big aveda. They made a god of gold. So forgive them. He's making the Aveda very big. Is that a reason? Is that an introduction why he's asking to forgive? If he has to forgive, you have to make the Aveda smaller. Please forgive him. So here he came and he said they did a big Aveda. They made an egel of gold, and therefore forgive him. You must say, okay, you have to say, probably what Moshe Rabbeinu said, Rashi must be that he's making the Aveda smaller, is minimizing the Aveda. Hainu means like this. To minimize the real Aveda itself, you can. They made a big Aveda. Moshe is saying that. I know, as if saying, I know they did the big Aveda. Nevertheless, but the connection of the Yidden, the blaming of the Yidden, why they did it, that he's trying to minimize. The reason why did it happen? And that's what he said. This is what Rashi says. What Moshe meant to say was, you caused it. Why did he say that? They're not so at fault. So that's what Rashi says. It can't be that it means kipshute, because then he's only making the Aveda big and then telling the Eibishter, and therefore, ba'aton, therefore forgive, because it's bigger than Aveda, therefore forgive. So it must be that he meant something that's not such a big Aveda. But that's what Rashi learns. He meant to say that they did the Aveda because you gave him the gold. It's your fault. It's not really their fault. Based on that, when Moshe Rabbeinu said that the gold, and he referred to the fact that they had a lot of gold, that's why they did the Egel. The way Rasha says it in Kisisa, Rasha says it here is a different shot. See, the Schapiro, we thought it's all the same. It's not the same thing. The Parsha Kisisa, Omre Moshe Lakadosh Baruch Hu, in Parsha Kisisa, Moshe said this to David Shebekavon Elamet Schus Al Yisrael. In order to and to make smaller their Aveda, the reason for their Aveda. But here it's not like that. He was speaking to the Eden Moshe. And he wanted to give him rebuke. Here the point is to stress how big the Aveda is. Over there he's asking David to forgive, so that's why he said it's your fault. See, here Rasha doesn't say that. Rasha doesn't say that Moshe Rabbeinu said that it's your fault. Over there, Rasha said, here Rasha just says, Egel, they made the Egel. Why is it called Zov? Because they made the Egel because they had a lot of gold. But he doesn't stress the point that therefore it's your fault. Umata movement, so now we understand. It's impossible for Rasha. Hamafarash Putu Shemikro says the Pasha Pshat, Lahovi Bepasha Kesisa Akosta Viklesev Besil Lemezovos Labal. Over there, he couldn't bring the posik. The kasha was, why doesn't he bring the posik? Where it says in Isaiah that he's saying the Eibush they gave a lot of kesef, therefore they made the through the Yuzov, they made the bow. Ki posik zeh mudgish, the posik zeh mudgish hakesef ezov shnos makadosh baruch hu. The posik says who gave him the gold? The Eibush gave him the gold. Belain has seen a stam, and he didn't stam give him gold. Ki my base him a lot. So what happens? What does this posik say? The Eibush says the Eibush gave him the gold. And the gold that the Eibishter gave him, know what they did with it? They used what the Eibishter gave him to do something against the Eibishter. That's what the Pasuk is saying to us. This point brings out how big the Aveda is. But there at Rasha learning that he's trying to show how small the Aveda is, at least why the Eden did it, couldn't bring this Pasuk. This Pasuk would stress an opposite point. In our parsha Dvorim, he's coming to rebuke them. Here Rasha brings the pasuk. He's rebuking them and he's telling them, look, David gave you the money, and you use that against him because he's trying to show them what they did was wrong. Now move on. The Rebbe, according to this, it's understood. After we learned the Pshat, we understand why Rasha does not learn that Dizov is the name of a place. And as the Rebbe said, maybe it's a place and called like that because these words represent the Aveda they did. And the Rebbe said, it should, because Zov was the reason why they did the Aveda, and that could be a reason why the place is called. So why does Rashi not learn like that? This could be because this is the cause why they sinned. So the Rebbe said, when can you say that because of a Maisa that happened, you call the place in that name? Has to be some part of it, or is the Maisa itself, or it's something that brought to it. So we asked Akasha. Here you could say Zov is what brought them to the Aveda. So Zov could mean the name of the place because of the Chet. So he says no. Al Pia now, based on what we said before, you can't do that. Why? Harei. Side the way we learn in our parsha that the fact that he said that it came through a lot of gold is faket is to stress how chomor, how strict the Aveda is, how bad the Aveda is. It's not that Rashi means that the Aveda is connected to Zov. We just learned that what Rashi is trying to say, that this is to strengthen the Aveda, that look how bad you were. The gold was given you by the Eibishter, and now you use it against him. How did you use it against him? To make an egel, but in the gold it's not hinted. And handle the Amud Nidja Parsha is also the way Rashi does it in Kisiso. There, the whole reason for the gold is to make the Aveda smaller. That the reason for the Aveda is not so bad. Hadizov, so according to both ways, the word dizov is prat zdodi be'ifane shalachet. This is a small detail in the way the chet was done, a gerem hamasayah b'chet, or something that helped the chet. This is not what the chet is. The word zov is here. See, and the Rebbe will explain, even though Rashi uses the lashon, bishvil zov, that they did the Aveda because of it, doesn't mean that this is the reason why they did the Aveda. This is only to show how bad the Aveda is. But this is not why they did Aveda. This is not the reason why they did Chet. You can ask, what's the reason why they did the Chet Egel? Because Moshe didn't come and they got scared. They thought he died or whatever, the whole thing. That's the Sibah. Because they had gold. The having gold is only a zaytik avorted. So having gold is, or it shows how bad the Aveda is. That's the Eibish's gold and look what you did. But what was the Aveda? What caused the Aveda? Something else. But it's a side thing. Or it's fakir to make smaller the Aveda, that it's not their fault, but it's not part of the Aveda itself. Doesn't make sense to call a name through a simple detail which makes the Aveda heavy or light. But not with a word that is in the Chet itself. Or something with which you did the Chet, or the real Sibah. We understand why Rashi can't learn that Dizov is the name of a place because of the Egel, because that's not how it works. It doesn't work that any word that's connected. It has to be the word to be give a name a place because of a word of an Aveda has to have the Teichen of the Aveda somehow. But what we're saying now, it's nothing to do with Teichen of the Aveda, or it's to make it less or to make it stronger, but not that this is the Aveda. But still not understood. Loshen Rashi, the Loshen of Rashi, according to what we just said, is not clear. Rashi should have said that he's giving him rebuke for the Egel that they did with a lot of gold. That Loshen would fit. This gold that they had, a lot of gold from the Eibishter, and that they made the Egel. So he's trying to rebuke them that, look, the gold, you used the Eibishter's gold to make the Egel. So he should have said he was machiach them for making the Egel with a lot of gold. But why did I say that he made the Egel? Because what's the word bishvil? The word bishvil is a loshen hamadgish, that a loshen that stresses. Shadizov, or you can see besached. Loshen is. It seems as if it's saying this is the reason for the Aveda. It's like someone would say, it's mamish like Rashi, as if Rashi would say, because of a lot of gold, they did the chet. That's what Rashi says. That they had. But that's not so. Why they made Aveda is because they were afraid Moshe died. This was just a prat in it. Certainly, over here, where we said that Rashi learning Pshat that Moshe Rabbeinu is using this to make the Aveda stronger. By saying that you did it because of the gold in a certain prat seems to make it lighter. That really, it's because of that. It's not really you. It's the gold that did it. So why does Rashi write Bishvil? So the explanation is Rashi, not in the simple Pshuta Shel Mikro, but the Rashi has Yena Shel Teira, has Chassidus in it, and every Rashi has Yena Shel Teira, the Rebbe said. But some Rashas also have Remez and Drush. So if you're going to look in the Chelik HaRemez or Yenish of Rasha, the Rebbe will answer it. With Yerusha al Posik Zeh Magdim Rashi, when Rashi says a pshat on this Posik, first thing that Rashi says in the Posik is, like we said before, the Skirom, he mentioned them. What did he mention? The sins, Achatoyim, Beremez. He mentioned them with a remez, a hint. He didn't say the Avera. He mentioned the places, which is a remez for Avera. Why didn't he say it outright? So we said before, he didn't want to, embarrass the Eden, covered of the Eden, so he didn't mention the outright Avera. What Rashi means is not only that Moshe Rabbeinu was keeping the covet by not mentioning outright the Averas, but the Keshem Shemipnei Kvedim Shel Yisrael. Because of the covenant of Eden, Moshe covered up and did not mention the Averis outright, even though he meant to rebuke him for it. He still did it in a way that it should not be outright said because of the covenant of Eden. So too, and for the same reason, Moshe was merames. In all these words, even though Rashi said, we learned the episode before, that Rashi is trying to give him a tichoche and showing how terrible the Aveda is. But at the same time, because of the covenant of Eden, he hacked around the derech remez, he hacked around that it's a limit schus on the Eden. This is also to give a limit schus a covenant of Eden. He's going to tell him how terrible the Aveda is. But he also hacks around here a remez of how small the Aveda is. In case of Rashi, that's why Rashi writes Bishvil Reizov. Because of, now as we said before, the words Bishvil Reizov seems to indicate that it's not your fault so much, it's something else that caused it. Yes. The Ramez Rashi says that to hint, Lahalimut Schus Anal, to hint to the limit Schus, Sha'atu Shagaram Televachula Mayasu Shalayachta. You caused it, so what do you expect him to do? So Rashi in Parsha Kisisa says it outright because that's exactly what Moshe was saying. Here, Rashi doesn't say it outright. Here, it's trying to make the Aveda big. But Rashi uses such a term to show that there is a reason why they did it, because of the gold, to be melames for the limit schus. Then the Rebbe adds more. Since in this case of the Egel, Moshe Rabbeinu said something in such a way that kept the covenant of the Eden, movement can make dissolve, but the Chocha Gufa. So not only why only this one would he be merames alimut schus, probably in every one of the avedas that he hinted, that he was mentioning, he threw in alimut schus also. And the Rebbe is going to go through every one of these avedas, and or in the lashon of the posik, or in the lashon of Rashi, we see alimut schus. And that Rebbe goes from one to another. The first thing is Bamidbar. What does Bamidbar mean? What did he mean to say? Bishvil Mashechisu Bamidbar. Because of what they got the Eibishter angry in the desert, Sha'omru, they said, Mi Yite Museinu. In the Midbar, after they crossed the Yamser, they had no water, so they said, Halavai would die, they complained. That's what Rashi says. Don't understand. Loma Romez Alzeh, Aidetevis Midbar. Why did the Remes to this thing, to the word Midbar? Shushem Kloli, the Kol HaMekemes. That's not a specific place. The whole area is called Midbar. Why didn't you mention the place where they complained? Where was that? The pasuk says it was a midbar scene. Asher beinei limo bein Sinai. Because the pasuk says. Why did they mention the Avera, what they did here in the midbar? The midbar doesn't really. It's not a specific place. Hello. The answer is. The word midbar is a hint to be melamed schus. They complained to the Eibishter, Halavai, we would die before, we can't take this. So the word midbar is a limit schus, why they did it. He can't even show you by midbar, since they were in the desert. It's a Posik says in Parshas Eiken. This is a big midbar, a fearful midbar, full of snakes and scorpions and no water. But the problem is, if Rashi means this, that he means midbar, but we know Rashi does not rely on any posik from later. So the Rebbe says, "V'gam lifnei parashat Seina mavuya sham midbar hu mokim shel nechoshim v'akram v'chulu." Rashi and Baleis already mentioned that it's a place of snakes. Rasha says in Baleischa that this cloud used to go up front and used to kill all the snakes. So we see there were snakes. Harimuven, so since it's such a terrible place that they were, we understand she's only soyin, Godel made. It's a very big test. So you can't blame him so much. So the reason the Torah mentioned, Moshe mentioned Midbar, and not the specific place, to hint at the same time he's complaining and telling them how terrible they were. That it was in the Midbar, terrible Midbar. So you could blame the Eden for being so afraid and complaining. The next thing was Arova. Pirish Rasha says, Bishvilo Arova. Arova means because of what happened in the Arova. Shechotu bebalpeir, they sinned with Aveir of Balpeir. Beshitim be'arvis Meyav, in Shitim. That's where the whole story with the daughters of Meyav and the Balpeir. And that's what he was meant when he mentioned the word Arova. That's what Rasha says. Tzorach lov, you have to understand. Arvis Meyav, hoi me Beis HaYeshimas is over Lashitim. Arvis Meyav was a big place. Started from Beis HaYeshimas all the way to over Lashitim. Why do you say Arova? Arova is a very general expression. Arova. If he wants to say this specific Aveda, it says in Chumash, in Parshas Bolok, where were they when they did this Aveda? In Shittim. So he should have Shittim. Why does he mention Arova? By mentioning Arova is a limit chus on the Eden. Why? The lotion is Bo Arova. Bo, by base Kmutza, the comets under the base. It's like as if it would say a hey. We know there are two things. Sometimes we say a word with a hey, with someone without. If it's with a hey, it's called a hey ayidiyah. Hey ayidiyah means we're talking about something that's known, specific, something known. Mostly, if you say shulchan, shulchan means a table. Ha shulchan means the table, and we're talking about a specific table. Now in Digduk, if it says a word with a shva, bi, something, it's bi, it's only, but if it says ba or bo, a patach or a komets, it's as if it would say with a hey. So, but the pasuk is saying ki'ilu kosev, as if the pasuk would say beho arava. How you do it? In the arava. Which arava is it? It is Rashi, but arvis meyav. So the pasuk is basically saying it was arvis meyav that he's talking about. The arava. Now, hine v'kriyas Hashem shel meyav v'amen. When Amen and Meyav come from the daughters of Leib, when they had relations with Leib, and they both became pregnant. So when they gave, each one gave a name. One gave a name Meyav, one gave an Amen. Now, Meyav, she gave him a name because it's Meyav. This child comes from my father. And Amen means my nation, but not so clear. So Rasha says, Meyav, Zushale Hoysatznub, the one that called her Meyav, called this child Meyav, was not such neasdik. Schapiro, she called the name to publicize that it came from her father. Abutzira, the younger one, called him with a nicer, more clean name. So she received the schar. It says by Amen, it says, the Abisha said, don't start up with Amen. Not only don't conquer them, don't antagonize them, don't start up, don't start up with them. But Meyav, he said, don't fight with them. He allowed them to make him trouble. And the reason Rashi says why? Because from Amen, the mother, the great-great-great-grandmother, was much more tzniyazik, and by Meyav, she wasn't tzniyazik. Rashi says clearly in Yisrei, on the Pasuk L'Seinai, where it says, Peked Avei Noves Albonim, the Eibishter remembers the Avei of the parents, Gavad the children. So Rasha says, only if the children behave that way. When will the Eibishter punish later generations for an Aveda that the great-great-grandfather did? Only if they continue in his ways, in his bad ways. In fact, if so, why did the Eibishter allow that they should be able to make trouble to Meyav? Because the mother, when she named him, she wasn't so tzniyazik. So because of that, generations later, David just said, now you could bother them. We said David doesn't punish the children unless they follow. Oh, that forces us to say, in the time of Moshe already also, they were still in the, because Rashi says if they follow the footsteps of the ancestors, they also get punished for that. Also, that's what happens here. So when we say that the children Meyav was punished, that they could start up with them, must be that they also were not tzniyazik. That's why the pasuk says Bo Arova, which means Arvis Meyav. That's a limud schus ba'avim balpeir. That's a limud schus for the Aveda they did there with balpeir. And the main part, what brought the Aveda balpeir was the fact that they worshipped the Zorah. But Shesibosa, what was the reason? How did they get them to worship? Ubeikra is a chetchel znus. It was the chet that they did of znus. And the Rebbe in the Horah says, we see that when Bilam gave him the Eitzah to do this, he said, didn't even stress the Avodah Zarah. He said, I know their God hates adultery. So therefore, if you get them to do the adultery, then the Eibushter will punish them. So we see the whole kvetch is this news. So comes out that when the Pasuk says, Mei bo arova, which means the arova, which is Arvis Meyov, is telling us that this was, you know why the Yidden did it? Because they were a Meyov. Why did they do the Aveda there? Because they were in a place that this was from the ancestors yet, and they all followed the same way. So the test is very big. In Orah 32, the Rebbe says there's a medrash, but you can't bring it into the Sikha because we're talking about Rashi. But the medrash says, which is Rebbe's Meir, that there are places where there mayones that dwell. If you drink from the people who drink from the wells, it brings them to do certain things. So it says that yesh shtufim bezima. There are places which just drinking the water brings you to znus. So here, Mayov is a place that was like that, the Medrash says. And that's a limit chus on the Eden. So we see here also limit chus. Then it says Meil Suf, by the Yam Suf. So Rashi says, what does that mean? What's that Aveda that he referred to? Amasha Himru b'Yam Suf, that they rebelled against the Eibushter by the Yam Suf. Sai b'Beyam no Yam Suf, Sai when they came to the Yam Suf. And there we see in Chumash B'Shalach, it says, Sha'amru, they said, Amibli ain't kvarim Mitzrayim. When they came to Yam, before the Eibushter split the Yam, they complained, what did you bring us here for? There's no graves in Mitzrayim. So they complained. So that's the complaint. And Chain, Benosam Metechayam. Also, when they crossed the Yarden already, was also, Shenemer, it says, Vayomru al Yom B'Yamsuf, that they rebelled on the Yam B'Yamsuf. And the Rebbe Orah says that since it says twice, the Yam B'Yamsuf, it's two. And here also he means both, because he says Mulsuf. Mulsuf means not in the Yam, but by the Yam. But which side? The Yam has two sides. So since it doesn't say which one, it means both. So what had happened was, the Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioning to them, reminding them what you did by the Yam Suf, going into the Yam and going out of the Yam. Okay, now I want to just mention, what did they do going out of the Yam? In Chumash we learned, before they went to Yam Suf, they complained, and then the Eibushter said, let them go, I'll split the Yam, fine. So, but they complained, we see what was Aveda that they did when they crossed the Yam, when they came out of the Yam. So Rashi says, like it says in the Gemara Erechem. The Gemara Erechem, it says that when they came out of the Yam, know what they said? They complained and they said, yeah, big deal. Just like we got out from the Yam, they're also going to get out. They even complained. The Rashi doesn't say that. So Rashi and Pshuta Shlemikra doesn't learn that. Adarabba, we see that Rashi says, why did Eibushter spit out the Yam, made the Yam spit out the Mitzrim? Kedei, the Yidden should not be able to say this. Kedei Shalei Yemru, they shouldn't say that we're coming out from here, they're going to go out from there and they're still alive and they'll catch us. So Rashi said they shouldn't say a siman that they did not say it. So what is the problem? That what did they do that they came out of the Yam? So there's one thing that we do find. We find in Chumash that when they crossed the Yam, they were gathering the sholol, they were gathering the gold and silver, and Moshe told them to leave and they didn't want to go. He forced them to leave. That's one thing we see. So according to Rashi, the Rebbe learns, that's what Rashi means when he says what they did, they crossed. That's what they did. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu mentioning them. This Meil Suf means these two Avedas. What's the limit schus here? Moving a limit schus. We can understand the limit schus. The way coming to the Yam, Beveyam al Sfas Yam, when they got to the edge of the Yam, they hoya shum afshoris b'derech hateva linot. So in derech hateva, naturally, there's no way to be saved. One side were the Egyptians, one side of the Yam. So that obviously is a limit schus. I mean, why they didn't an Aveda, they shouldn't have complained, but we could understand why they did it. So when they traveled away from the Yam, when they were busy with the Bizis Hayam, with collecting from the Yam, and Moshe Rabbeinu had to take him away. That's an Aveda. But we could understand why they did it. It's Dover Shakadosh Baruch Atzmei Rotza Sheish Asik was it. The Eibushter wanted they should do that. You caused it. The same way somebody again, you caused it. Because David told him, get all the gold and silver from Mitzrayim. We will get some customers there. So we understand why they really wanted to do it. So you can't blame them why they didn't really want to go. Then Bein Poron, what's the Bein Poron? Masha also Bein Midbar Poron. Rashi says what they did in Midbar Poron are Yidei HaMeraglim. They did in Midbar Poron, that's through the Meraglim. The Shakash have a labor bekitzer. Rashi says a very short Bechet HaMeraglim. What happened in Poron? Bechet HaMeraglim. Okay, Yetzav or something like that. Why does he say Ayidei HaMeraglim, through the Meraglim? Ela Kavanosa L'Dayik, Rashi wants to be Medayik, Shachet Hoyo Ayidei HaMeraglim. Rashi stresses it was through the Meraglim. Which means, hey, may Sisu Peters in Israel, they convinced the Eden. Veluli HaMeraglim Le'hoyo Chetim in Israel, if not for the Meraglim, they wouldn't sin. So Rashi is telling us that what Moshe Rabbeinu said when he said through this, he meant to say in a way that Ayidei HaMeraglim, that's their fault and the Eden is not their fault. Then we go on Bein Teufel Beloved. And we said, what does that mean? It's not a place, but it's Shetoflu al Amon Sholova, that they argued against the Mon. And how does the Mon hinted here? Because the Mon is white. Mashamadgish Khan, Leib and Hamon. So the Chura White Tag, if he wants to mention the Mon, why pick such a detail? The Mon was white, it's a big deal. So every time you say the word, the color white, it means the Mon. I mean, why did he hint the Mon through the color white? So you could say the reason he did it, in the Yena Shaltera, not in simple pshat, who shemekivin shamon hoyelovan, since the Mon was white, cholok umufshet mikol tzeva, smooth and unclothed of any color. So there is no color, and if it has no color, you have no grasp over it. Valderech pirish Rasha, like Rasha says, in Parashat Tzav, shemeisha shimas kol zayin yemei amaluim b'cholok lovan. That Moshe Rabbeinu, all the 7 days with the dedication of the Mishkan before they put it up permanently, Moshe was a Kohen Gadol, and what did he wear? He didn't wear the big dikuna. A shirt, a white shirt. And the reason is a white shirt is posher that has no color. Hainu sho'inya shal pshitus, sheyav shal mashpidayim. It's pshitus, it's simple, that you can't grasp it. A color you could grasp. When it's white, you can't grasp it. And that's what the Pasuk is telling. Alimut schus. Since the Hamon was white, harei le'yahoyel embazet tainu gamiti. So they didn't have a real pleasure in eating it. And the Rabbi says, even in the bottom, the Gemara in Yuma says, it says in the Mon, you could taste any taste you want of any food. But the guy ate the Mon, and he wanted to taste sushi. So he tasted sushi, but he didn't see sushi. He didn't see that. And then when you don't see what you eat, says a blind person never gets full. Because you don't see. So here, they didn't get full. And he brings also from Rashi, Rashi's Achilas Hamon, Tayim Tam Kol Aminim, and they ate the Mon, they tasted everything. All they saw was Mon. But Meila move on, Sheprat Zen, Neisibok and Lislin Alamon. So this prat that was white is a reason why we can understand why they complain. Even though they didn't complain the fact that it's white, that's not what they complain. That's what we can't say is the name of the place. Because if that's what the complaint was, then the whole sikha that we said before falls off. We said before that it can't be a name because it doesn't describe the Aveda. If the complaint was against the whiteness of the Mon, then this does describe the Aveda. So they didn't complain against. But Lopel Mamish, we understand what bothered them. They bring the general Tnua to fight, oppose the Mon. Then what's the Chatzeres? Chatzeres is Machlekes Shel Keirach, the Machlekes of Keirach. And here also we find the limit schutz. Machlekes Keirach v'Adosei. Rashi should have said the Machlekes of Keirach and his people. What's the shell? The Machlekes of Keirach. Rashi, the Machlekes Keirach. That's it. Machlekes of Keirach. Rashi wants to be Ramas a limit schutz. HaMachlekes hoise rak shel Keirach. The Machlekes was only of Keirach. The Eden also argued against Moshe. It's all Keirach's fault. It's not theirs. Shekeirach pita esim. Keirach convinced them, like the Pasuk says. Like Moshe said, when David got later angry, he said, one person sinned, and you're going to be angry on the whole Eidah? After the Peil Peter Skulum, the Peil, he convinced them all, Rasha says. And nevertheless, Moshe said, one person sinned, then you're going to punish them all. And look at the Sichas in Chelik Gimel, page 53, the Rebbe is Mazbe Barichas, that what Moshe Rabbeinu meant, that only one person is at fault, and that's Keirach. And that's why Rasha says, Machlekes Shel Keirach. It's only Keirach, and this is all Meramis. Now the Rebbe said, the Hinei Parshas Dvorim Keirim Le'elam B'Shabbos Lifnei Tisha B'Av B'Shabbos Tisha B'Atzmai. Parsha Dvorim is always read the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, or the Shabbos of Tisha B'Av. This is also connected to the Nakuda that we just said. The whole union of the 3 weeks of Bein Absorim, Azman Hush Azman Atzem Mechichas Israel. It's a time that is rebuke. Just coming to the 3 weeks is a rebuke for the Eden. Especially the Gemara says in time is Megalgal in Skus L'Yem Zakai. A good thing happens in a good day, and a bad thing happens in a bad day. So the day itself is bad. So when it comes to these days, it's rebuke. So Parsha tells us in the beginning of the Parsha that even when the Eibishter gives a rebuke, he still cares about the covenant of the Eden. And just like it's Lagabe, this posuk that we just learned, it's also Lagabe, the whole union of the 3 weeks, which is a Teichoche. The Tachlis of why is there the Golus? And we said the Golus is a Teichoche, it's a rebuke, is for a good reason, to go higher. The Gadol Kvedim Shel Yisrael, to bring the covenant of the Eden even more. For that we understand that even while we're in Golus, while the Teichoche is taking place in Golus, Nika Kvedim Shel Yisrael, the covenant of Eden is Nika Kanal Pirush Rashi, like we said before, that in the Teichoche of Moshe, where it's trying to show how bad the Avera is, he was Maramas, a covenant of Yisrael, and Limud Zchus. So here also in the Golus, in the 3 weeks, there is something, a Limud Zchus, something good there. Covenant of Yisrael. Now, what is so good? What do we see good in the 3 weeks? See, what will happen later, it'll become good. We know it'll come. We're saying that while the Teichoche is taking place, it's still good. But the Rabbi doesn't say everything, but he says one thing. One of the things that stresses the covenant of the Eden in middle of the Golus, it's the first pasuk of Eicha. Eicha Yoshva Bodod. The pasuk starts, Yirmiyah is complaining, how could Eden Yerushalayim see Bodod, be by yourself? And that's a klola, that's a churban. Sheyesh b'zeh gami the teva. There's something good here also. That being bodod is good. It says am levodod yishkem v'geim leyischashav. The Maila Vayid says that the Yid are separate. Yidden are separate. They don't mix with the Goyim. Shebnei Yisrael einem isarven im Salem. The Yidden don't get involved with the Goyim. Ukemaimar Azal, like the Chazal say, Hashem and einem isarven v'leimed. Any liquid that you put in mixes with other liquid. If you have water and you put in some wine, it'll mix. Oil doesn't mix. It'll always come on top. Kach Yisrael einem isarven im akum. Yidden don't mix with Goyim. That's a Maila. So, and the Rebbe said the Sikh, in Parsha Dvorim Tovshin Lamed Aleph, when the Rebbe was talking a lot about me, Yehudi, about not bringing Goyim into Eden and not mixing the Goyim with Eden. So he said this word. So he brought this medrash many, many times in those Sikhs. So that's a Maila. So when it says Eicha Yoshev Bodod, which Eicha means, how could the Eden be Bodod, such a terrible thing? It's a terrible thing, it's a Teichoche. But there is a covenant here also of this Eden, of this Inyan. Maila Zushev Eicha Yoshev Bodod, this Maila, that the Eden are separate, the Maila of it. Don't get mixed with the Goyim. Niske, we will be zeicha shetisgale kvedim shel Yisrael begolui. That the covenant of the Eden will be revealed begolui, and that'll be bebinyan b'samikdash hashlishi when the 3rd base mikdash is built. Shegam hu nirmis the pasuk zeh. It's also nirmis in this pasuk. He brings in the bottom from the Shemesh of the Tzemach Tzedek, and the pasuk Eicha Yosher Bodet is hinted the union of the base hamikdash sheyeboded b'mheira b'yameinu u'ba'agolot yidan.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
Gold was not expensive then.